Hello everybody and welcome back to Kerbal Space Program 2, where we've been working on getting into Duna for a while now. We're going to warp around to here, and we're going to do another aerobrake pass, but there's not going to be that many more of these that are required. We'll continue to tune down our periapsis when we feel it's safe. I currently do not, under any circumstances... Oh, this bug again. It seems like this is happening every time I first start up the game. It's very interesting. This is clearly a bug. All we gotta do is reload, and it's fine. So this is the atmosphere transition. We actually want to make this load. So we'll load that save in. And it'll be absolutely okay from here on out. I have no idea why the game is doing this all of the sudden with this craft in particular, but it absolutely is. So let's try that again. We're going to warp around to here, and now we're not going to have that problem. So around we go. And we'll just continue to aerobrake. Okay, we are in atmosphere now. We just need to align ourselves retrograde. Perfect. And we'll be in the atmosphere here for about 7 minutes is our total atmospheric duration of this orbit right now, which is pretty good, really. That's quite a lot of drag over that time. You can see here the apoapsis is already dropping. That is wonderful. Let's take it up to, of course, 4x warp on our way through here. We want to get as much warping done as possible so we can aerobrake as quickly as possible. It's a lot of aerobrakes, but this is a very specific mission for that, right? Under most circumstances, I would not aerobrake this thoroughly. But here we are. So I was just looking it up, and at least in KSP1, it requires about 7,000 meters per second to get from sea level to orbit on Eve. So that's a thing. I've been thinking about how we're going to tackle that Eve mission, and I'm not sure yet. It's going to be interesting. The landing is not really the hard part on Eve. Assuming you can survive re-entry, which is maybe a big assumption, but assuming you can survive re-entry, Eve isn't too bad. I would probably just overkill the parachutes and then have a big inflatable heat shield, or maybe more than one big inflatable heat shield, and then call that good. Eve is not that complicated. However, we would want to land on land, right? Not in water. Landing in water would be bad. Or I guess it's not water on Eve. Landing in Explodium would be bad. So we're coming through on this aerobrake. It's a bit of a slideshow. That is, I guess, to be expected here in KSP2. And we're definitely dropping down that apoapsis by pretty appreciable numbers. We're still about a minute away from the periapsis here, and we'll see what our heating situation ends up looking like. It was acceptable on the last pass, and this pass should be less energetic. That said, that periapsis is going down a pretty decent amount. Well, we'll keep an eye on it. I do like the apoapsis going down. Also, note how surface velocity is currently holding rather than increasing. That's a very good sign. It's actually decreasing, that surface velocity. Okay. Well, I am noting the singular heat gauge here. We'll see if any others appear. But our surface velocity is indeed going down. So in theory, our heating levels should be going down as well. We're at the periapsis right now, so we're starting to go back up as of right now. And this is definitely going to be a little bit tense this time as well, it seems. Interesting. Look at that. The periapsis is currently increasing. Our surface velocity is still going down at this juncture. Now, to be clear, I don't think that we're actually aero captured. I don't think that in this situation, we're not coming out of the atmosphere. We're absolutely coming out of the atmosphere. But this has been very interesting. With that periapsis coming up, that's kind of wild. Let's kick it out of physics warp. Yeah, that's really interesting. I would not expect the periapsis to be increasing right now. Why would that be happening? The only thing that I can imagine is that we're getting some sort of radial force, but we're not. We should be getting a pure retrograde force here. Now it's going back down again. It's like it was a radial retrograde. That's really strange. This is what I would expect, is for the periapsis to be slowly going down. It went up by a couple hundred meters there. That's not a bad thing. Since we've got this heating issue, the periapsis being down by like 19.5 could potentially cause us issues. But that's absolutely fascinating. I would not have expected that. Well, we definitely managed to shave off a few meters per second on our overall velocity there, and that is excellent. Of course, the apoapsis is still reasonably high up. Let's go back into warp at this point. I just wanted to see if warp was causing the issue there, and it wasn't. I don't really have an explanation for that behavior. Maybe that's a bug? But it shouldn't have come back up on the periapsis. There should have been absolutely no radial force there. Wild. Well, we're continuing to drop our apoapsis for a little bit here, certainly, as we come out of the last little bit of the atmosphere. But yeah, that was very strange. I mean, if our periapsis is just going to stay relatively stable, I like that. I don't really want the periapsis to dip any deeper because of the heating problem. So we're going to have to, if we don't want to burn fuel, we're going to have to continue to, and to be clear, we don't want to burn fuel. We're going to have to continue to do what we can here in terms of aerobrake, which is very slow around Duna, absolutely. We're going to do a very similar technique, probably, for our Eve landing, with the slight exception that the Eve landing is gonna be a lot more dynamic. And by dynamic, I mean it's going to go a lot faster. The Eve atmosphere is just insane. So we're going to warp to, like, here. Okay, around we go for another aerobrake pass. We're down to 631, 531. So about 600 kilometers above the surface. And we'll just align on over. Wonderful. And once we have aligned here, we can warp a little bit, because we are still a little above the atmosphere. Excellent. And we'll just bring that right on back down. And we'll just sit at 4x warp. This is fine. We are getting steering at 4x, so this seems fine. There seems to be a difference between 4x time warp and 4x physics warp, I'm noticing. 4x time warp gives us this choppy frame rate, but allows us to steer. And I'm not sure how to access this outside of the atmosphere. It's kind of weird. Regardless, we are currently watching this periapsis go. It should be going down, and indeed it is. We'll see if it comes back up. But once again, we're going to be spending about 7 minutes in the atmosphere here. So that seems to be pretty decent. Although I think it's a little longer than 7 minutes. We're getting pretty close to coming in for an actual landing. So that is absolutely fine. And I am committed to getting a landing done this episode. So we'll see how many more aerobrake passes this takes. But hopefully not many. Hopefully not many. So around we go, and that apoapsis is going to continue dropping. I'm a little bit afraid at this point that we're going to be landing on the night side, which is not ideal, necessarily. Let's see, our periapsis is there right now. I mean, we don't need to worry about it just yet. We've got a ways to go on the apoapsis, no doubt about that. But that's okay. Note how we are currently accelerating towards that periapsis, and that is fully expected, but the drag is slowing us down, reducing our overall potential energy. Yeah, our speed up is slowing down, I think. That's a weird thing to say, but I do believe that that is what is happening here. Our acceleration is decreasing. So we've dropped about 40 kilometers so far, and we're still 45 seconds from the periapsis. So I think we're dropping, like, currently a solid 100 kilometers or so per pass here, which seems reasonably okay. I would drop deeper into the atmosphere, but I'm concerned about engine heating if we do that. We can see our periapsis is currently down to, like, 19.4. And we'll see if that comes back up. It may or may not. We're seeing those heating gauges. And we've currently dropped by about 60 kilometers. So yeah, that's looking pretty solid. About 70 kilometers on the first half, so probably about 70 on the second half as well. So like 140 kilometers on that drop. I like it. So we're past the periapsis now, and we can see our periapsis is starting to increase. That's very strange to me. That really doesn't feel like it should be happening. Maybe there's some sort of a wind effect that is pushing us in a radial direction? But okay, we'll take it. So the reason why that's probably a good thing that that's happening is the heating. That just puts us to having a fairly consistent periapsis. We don't want to go deeper because we're almost certainly going to lose these engines if we do. So if we don't want to burn the engines, we got to hold this as it is. I would, if the heating wasn't an issue, go a little bit deeper into the atmosphere here just to make this a little quicker. But as it is, it's the best we can do. So this should hit somewhere around 19.8 and then start going back down again if it's at all similar to last time. There was a bit of a, like, reload there, and then this started going down. It was like we entered into a different sphere of influence or something. But there was definitely a flash, and then this reset and started going down. I think we're experiencing a small bug there. It's a bug in our favor, and there's not really a single thing we can do about it. So I guess it's okay. Yeah, at this point we've dropped like 120 kilometers, and we've still got a ways to go here. We were at 640 previously, I believe, if I remember correctly. So that's pretty good. The periapsis goes to about 19.6, so we are dipping slightly deeper into the atmosphere with each approach. That's fine. We're completely okay with that because we have slightly less velocity with each approach. So that just means that each approach gets a little bit more efficient in terms of raw meters per second that are shaved off. So once we get up to like 33 kilometers, this speed is extraordinarily safe, right? There's no problem whatsoever with that one. And that apoapsis is still dropping. We've gotten about 125 kilometers at this point, but we're definitely losing efficiency on it. No doubt about that. Yeah, I think it's going to end up being around 125. So that's really not bad. That's basically 4 aerobrake passes. However, it's going to be slightly less efficient as we come down in terms of the apoapsis reduction. So, I mean, yeah, that's reasonable. We're making solid progress here. But we're not quite where we want to be yet. For sure. Let's get ready for another pass. So 48 kilometers, 49, and we are out of the atmosphere. We're going to then warp around to about here, and onward we go. Perfect. So another orbit. There we go. Let's just position ourselves. We are not in the atmosphere yet. So that seems absolutely fine. Okay. We are almost positioned. As soon as we're positioned here, I'll warp us down into the atmosphere. And that'll put us into 4x physics warp. There we go. Perfect. This is where we want to be. We should be seeing this periapsis dropping, and indeed it is. This is now up to almost 8 minutes in the atmosphere per pass. So that is getting significantly better. That is a good sign. The real question is, how much of this velocity are we able to shave off before our periapsis goes too deep? We might have to do an adjustment of the periapsis in the other direction. We'll see. Although, with that radial going on, may or may not be relevant. That seems to, like, automatically compensate for that for us, but we could certainly do that if we needed to. So, I was just wondering what this part was here. Specifically the bit that was hanging out there. That's our reaction wheel. It kind of looks like an unextended solar panel in a weird sort of way. Like a small one. Like an absurdly small one. I mean, we have absurdly small solar panels right now, to be sure. But that's all absolutely fine. So we're at like I think we were at like 515 when we started this, or I think like 517, technically. But I'll round it to like 515. So that's looking good. We are dipping down into the deeper portion of the atmosphere, and this is where we see the majority of our gains, for sure. So we've dropped it by, call it 5 kilometers. It's a little over that, but it's absolutely fine to call it 5 kilometers for now. And it's going to be 10 kilometers very shortly. Still a minute and a half from the periapsis. So, I mean, that's going to be where the bulk of our apoapsis reduction is going to be, but that's fine. We're expecting this to take us down to like 400 kilometers by the time we come out of the atmosphere. That would be ideal. I don't know if it's going to get us quite that low, but it would definitely get us a ways. And we can see here that we are increasing our surface velocity, so that is noted, but every single pass here, we're losing potential energy. Or I guess I should say momentum. We're losing some potential energy as well, but it's mostly momentum. So that is absolutely wonderful. We're going to be hitting the periapsis in 30 seconds at this point. So on this first half, we've dropped 35 kilometers so far. So that's definitely looking okay. I'm noting the heat gauge, although we're going to be going up very soon here. We're about 15 seconds to periapsis, and we are decreasing our surface velocity before we reach the periapsis. So that is absolutely noted. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and we are going back up. Excellent. Periapsis is definitely a couple hundred meters lower. No doubt about that. However, on that first half, we did end up dropping about 55 kilometers on our apoapsis. So that's looking pretty decent, for sure. 55 kilometers means that on the second half, we'll drop a total of 110, putting us at a target of roughly 405 kilometers. It'll be a little higher than that, I think. Or actually maybe a little lower than that because of the way I rounded it. But roughly 400 kilometers is our target for this pass. So that's definitely making solid gains, but we have a ways to go. No doubt about it. Note how the heat gauges aren't quite as bad as they were last time. Even though our periapsis was a reasonable amount lower. That is, of course, indicative of the fact that we're losing momentum. There's less energy on each one of these approaches, and that is a magnificent thing. We're very glad about that. We've gone up into the thicker portions, or rather the thinner portions of the atmosphere here. And that's absolutely understood. Okay, that was that flash that I was talking about that indicates that our periapsis is going to start going down again. I really feel like that's a bug. That's not the way that those physics are supposed to work. I don't know what causes it, it is in our favor, I think. Although I think it might just be a display issue. Because I feel like we are dipping into the atmosphere at about the correct rate. So this might just be a display issue and not actually affecting our orbit. Which we've definitely run into those in the past. No doubt about that. So we're at 420 for our apoapsis right now. We still have a fair amount of atmosphere to go. We're only at 28 kilometers right now. So that's looking decent. We are targeting that 400. I don't think we're going to get to 400. It's going to be a little less than that. But 418 is not bad. That's pretty decent. That's about 100 kilometers on that pass. Next pass is probably going to be closer to like 70. Unless we were to tune down our periapsis, which I do not want to do because of the heating. I'm still concerned that if we were to dip that down to like even 18, I feel like we would have significant engine overheat issues. I don't think we should, to be clear. Like, we're moving at a kilometer per second, right? What's our orbital velocity? Yeah, a kilometer per second. A kilometer per second and atmosphere this thin, I'm still surprised that we have any amount of heating issue popping up. However, I have run tests off camera to see if those are real heating issues. I don't know if it's a bug or not, but it does destroy the engine if you dip too low. So I do not want to do that. I was just curious and ran it off camera, and I'm like, I wonder. And yep, it destroys the engines. So we don't want to dip too low. We want to be pretty cautious with this. We're making gains every single pass. And we're going to want to, of course, warp around again. So we'll warp to about here, and we'll take another pass. It's beginning to feel like we're not going to get this done this episode. Unless this is a really long episode. I just looked at the timer, and I'm like, we're still pretty close to the beginning of this episode. We're doing pretty well. Oh. I'm not a huge fan of that. That's for sure. Well, let's take one more aerobrake pass and see where we're at. Maybe it's got to be next episode. Those heating issues are definitely throwing off my estimations. No doubt about it. Because we're seeing significant heating issues. Granted, we do have a pretty high apoapsis still. But let's take this one final aerobrake pass. And I think we're going to have to do one more episode of this. I really did not want to do that. I'm not sure we have a choice at this point, though. Like, our apoapsis is still rather high. We've bled off a lot of speed, to be sure. But this is maybe not the correct location to be doing this. I mean, it's Duna, right? The atmosphere is ridiculously thin. We knew that going into this. But I don't want to burn fuel if we can at all help it, because this is absolutely our best chance at successfully completing this mission. So I think we're going to have to take one more episode at this. Surely next episode is going to be the last one. I don't want to do 3 full aerobrake episodes. That's going to be absurd at that point. I would really prefer not to. Well, I think a lot of it is our periapsis is definitely a fair amount higher than it should be. I think that's really what's throwing off my gut timing calculations here. Is that adjustment of our periapsis upward. That absolutely should not be happening. And at this point, we should be at a periapsis of like 18 kilometers, maybe even like 17.5. Low enough that we might run into significant heating issues and have to burn in order to prevent losing our engines. Well, this is going down quickly at this point, and it shouldn't be. So maybe that's compensating for it. Let's see where this apoapsis actually, or rather periapsis, actually ends up being. We're still a minute away from it. And we're currently at about 20 kilometers. 19 kilometer periapsis, still 47 seconds away. So we're definitely dipping down sub 19. I feel like that does compensate for it. That's definitely not how these orbital dynamics should work, to be clear. But I think it's okay. We're still about 27 seconds away from the periapsis. Wonderful. And there's those heat gauges. Those popped up a little bit later than they have in the past couple of runs, so that's looking good. Our periapsis of about 18.7, that feels about approximately right. It's maybe a little bit higher than I would expect, but certainly not outside of the ballpark. Okay. Well, we're down to 365 on our apoapsis. That's looking good. And that'll continue to drop pretty appreciably for the next little while as we continue to aerobrake here. It's true, though, that this would be a lot more time efficient if we were willing to burn fuel. No doubt about that. But here we are. We are not willing to burn fuel for this at this juncture. We have no reason to burn fuel for it, right? We can just continue to aerobrake forever at this point. And just get all of this free delta V change. There's no reason not to be honest. So we're down to 346 at this point, so that's a drop of like 70-ish? Ish. 70-ish kilometers so far, and we've still got a fair amount of ways to go on this particular aerobrake pass. So we're definitely doing pretty okay on that front. I don't think that the periapsis should be coming up at this time, but it feels like it's dipping deeper every time, and it feels like it's dipping deeper at about the correct rate. So I think that this is a display bug, where it's just not correctly predicting our actual periapsis, for whatever reason. So I guess I'm okay with that, as long as that's working correctly. And I currently believe that it is working correctly in reality, it's just displaying incorrectly. So that's fine. We're now at about 80 kilometers that we've reduced this, and we're still at 25 kilometer altitude. We're going to continue to come out of this atmosphere for a while here. We're definitely having longer and longer aerobrake passes. There's no doubt about that. And we're also in night side as of right now, which is, not necessarily ideal. We could twist our periapsis around over here. I'm going to take us out of warp for this. We could twist our periapsis with a radial burn. It would need to be a radial prograde burn. And bring it around, like, over here. That would be really awkward. I don't think that's really the way to go. Maybe at the apoapsis, if we were to do a radial burn here, something like that. 9 kilometers? Okay. Yeah, I don't like this idea. I don't like this idea at all. I would like our periapsis to be a little closer to the day side, not really at the terminator like this. We can think about messing with that, but for the moment, I think that we're just going to call this relatively good where we're at. We'll continue to warp through the atmosphere here. We're down to 326, so we need to drop it a little bit further than that in order to count it as like 100 kilometers dropped there. But we're making solid progress on that. I think that we're currently like 3 or 4 aerobrakes away at this point from not exiting the atmosphere. Our orbit's definitely decaying, and that's good. That's exactly what we want. So I think we're making solid progress there, but it is time to put a cut in here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and next episode, I 100% guarantee we will be landing this thing. I hope. You can leave your offerings to the engagement gods in the form of likes, comments, subscribes, and bell ringings, and a very special thank you to all of the channel members for making this video possible, including ALS Gamer, Atala, Andy McGar, Ali Lee, Dark Horse, Upper Cumberland Gamers, Nick Smarty, Dimitri H, Punching the Microphone, Tommy, Kintogan, and all the rest. And of course, you. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to support the channel, you can click the join button down below the video, and as always, I will see you all next time.